Hello and welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor. I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I have a huge interest into technology. I have to tell you, looking at the things that will happen tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that is where I really spend most of my time. It's like I try to mentally live in the future, and sometimes it leads me in these positions where I'm early to things, and you find these incredible guides to being early to things. Like, think about all the things that we know that don't exist yet and know that there's someone that actually has to make that happen. Angelo Del Priore is a partner with HP Tech Ventures, and he is very active in the space related to AI, related to virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming, and he is here to join us today to share his leadership line of sight. Welcome, Angelo.
Hey,
how are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to getting to chat with you today.
Oh, I really appreciate that. It's so good to see you. We do a little bit of a pre-call when we do this beforehand, and I just remember leaving that call and being like, I just had a glimpse into all of these things that you see, because as someone who works as you do, you are funding and making deals that fund tomorrow.
I certainly hope so. That I love my job, right? I really get to work with and hopefully help lots of entrepreneurs, even the ones that I don't fund, bring forth tomorrow and today, right? And make things happen for all of us. I find it a fascinating job. It's a great job.
It's such an interesting space, though, but from the outside, I think that a lot of people only really ever see technology companies when they see them hit it in a very public way, right? Like, a lot of people see like maybe the acquisition of Instagram by Facebook, but they didn't know that Instagram came out of South by Southwest in like 2006 with a large valuation, right?
Yeah. They don't maybe see the slog, right? Or the things that don't actually hit and get that billion or multi-billion dollar acquisition, right? Like, they don't see the 99 non-Instagrams, right?
Yeah. And that's something where you spend a lot of your time talking to people that are in that startup position where they have an idea. Often they own intellectual property, and they're moving through trying to make this idea exist in the world. And I know when I look around me, I always think that everything I can see started in the mind of someone else. Where along the path do you often find these startups that you develop relationships with?
All over the place. So I'm literally kind of intersecting with folks who are, 3 people and a dog, right? The kind of the quintessential, garage founders, to people who are much later stage and have raised, 25, $50 million and are a team of 100 people, right? And are well on their way. I tend to focus on the earlier stage of those things, maybe like a dozen people, 10 people, maybe a little bit, $1 million or $500,000 of revenue. But I tend to play in the earlier phase where they're still kind of working on that product market fit, and there's a ton of risk. Just where HP is mostly focused on in terms of the risk reward ratio. We're looking for earlier stage. We bring a lot of the go-to-market capabilities, the branding capabilities. We can do a lot of great technical due diligence, right? Think about all the engineers and PhDs, et cetera. We can kind of have a touch and feel for the market, right? Think about all the salespeople we have. Think about all the product managers we have, right? So that's kind of the extra stuff we can bring. Sorry, earbuds are a little bit too big for me. So then that's the 1 + 1 = 10. Like, if I can find a great technology company, right? It's like, boom, I can really help them because we have this part of the puzzle. They have some great IP. Bring those two together, right? And everyone can kind of win tremendously.
That's so interesting when you take a look at it from your resource perspective, because there's so many other people that would fund technology that can't go as deep as you can. They can't approach those small teams because they don't have those resources.
I think a lot of corporate VCs have a fundamental advantage in terms of the resources we have to bear on assessing and assisting startups because of the aforementioned advantages. I was just on a panel at Haas's Berkeley Business School, at MBA program on Wednesday night talking about this. It's just like, we have all these resources to bear. How can we not do a great job? Still tough. Still, if you're doing pre-seed, right, 4 out of 5 investments are going to fail, right? It's kind of an odd job to be at, right? Like every time I invest in someone, I think this is the one, 10, 20x. But statistically speaking, right, I know I'm wrong. But it's kind of like a baseball player, right? Every time they swing, they think, I'm going to get on base. But statistically speaking, if you bat 300, that's pretty darn good. That's professional. My odds are even worse than that, right?
How do you not suffer from altitude sickness? Because you're often talking about deals that like these are like 11-digit deals, right? Like we're talking about the tens of millions of dollars, and getting up to the plate that you're going to bat 1 out of 5.
It's inspiring. My job, I'm overworked and underpaid, right? Andrew, if you're listening, Andrew's my boss, amazing guy. It's an inspiring job. I get to work. I get to interact with people who are brilliant and hardworking and passionate about what they want to do. Okay. And my job is to sift through 1,000 of these people and fund a handful of them, help a handful more partner with HP, even if we don't invest with them, right? Because they're too small, they're too big, they're not quite strategic enough. I still want to help them. So maybe I'll help them get a partnership with HP. I honestly hope I help dozens of them with some good advice. Honestly, I hope I help a lot more than that with good advice, right? I hope I help them with connections, right? So, I'm a failed PhD. I got 3/8 of the way through my PhD process, and then I was like, oh, this isn't going to work. But I think also like lots of people, lots of other venture capitalists, PhD or no PhD or whatever, don't you want to help people with advice, right? We all have limited check sizes, right? There's this imbalance, right? Lots of entrepreneurs, limited amount of capital, supply demand issue. Everyone wants that. Fundamentally, people want to help others. So we all try to give advice, I think, to the entrepreneurs. And we can't give them money, so we try to give them feedback on their ideas. So you were trying to help folks and trying to make money, obviously, for ourselves, right? It's self-interested, right? So I hope people will come back and remember us. And even if it's not a good fit this time, maybe, the next time it will be. So
That is a really interesting position. Can you help us unpack that a little bit? When you first make contact with a startup that was unknown to you, what does that often look like?
So, there's so many ways I intersect with a startup, like dozens of ways. At a conference, inbound, outbound, a warm contact through a biz dev person, a salesperson, an engineer, through another VC, through a friend, through an alumni network, through you. It happens so many different ways. So it just kind of varies, right?
I love it because you're giving us a glimpse into the community behind the scenes. Like as outsiders, we see the boom, right? We don't see all the things that didn't boom or almost boomed.
Yeah, it's not Shark Tank, right? It's not it's not like make a decision in 15 minutes, right? And that's even edited down, right? I've had friends on Shark Tank, right? That's a lot of editing down, right? And then there's, by the way, after the Shark Tank, right, that some percentage of those deals don't even happen, right? Sometimes.
And when you determine that like one of these startups is maybe coffee worthy, what is your initial litmus test that gauges your interest?
I'm doing a lot of, $1 to $5 million check sizes, right? Early stage deals. So there's a bit of financial analysis, but it's not private equity late stage deals. So you can't do a discounted cash flows like an investment banker would do, because there's no 8 quarters of steady state cash flow, right? It's not a mom and pop business where, okay, I'm going to take the expected growth rate and the annuity and apply a discount rate. Doesn't work. Way too assumptive. Doesn't make any sense. So I rely on EQ, right? Emotional intelligence, like getting a feel for somebody. I rely on those engineers, right? Put a little black box. I've got some engineers who are perfectly aligned with my interests because we all work for the same company, the same CEO and board. Technical due diligence that way. I'll talk to their customers. I'll talk to their channel partners if they have any. I'll talk to all their founders. I'll look through their, I'll look at their board meeting, board presentations, etc. I'll walk with their CFO and walk through their financial forecast, even if it's only fiction and I know it's going to be financial fiction. Even if it's a financial forecast, I know it's going to be one thing, which is incorrect, right? But understand the logic of it. But just understand the person, challenge them, right? And see how they react. It's like, we're just having a conversation. I'm not trying to, take your child away. I'm not trying to like hurt anybody. I'm having an intellectual conversation with you, right? So is this person getting mad? Is this person able to kind of defend their rationale? Are they able to kind of like, if I'm starting to poke at something, if I ask them, oh, you're trying to like do something in the gaming space. Well, how many gaming PCs are sold in the United States? Okay, well, how many of those have a discrete or integrated GPUs? Okay, you don't know that question? Okay, well, what's the average price of a GPU? Okay, well, how many of those are RTX 8000s? Okay, you don't know that question? Like, you've got to put in the sweat equity and able to answer these basic questions and double or triple clicks. Because otherwise, why am I going to write you $1,000 check? I cover a number of different industries for HP. I need to make sure you understand your specific focus area better than I do, right? I will actually understand your area before I write a check pretty well, because I will talk to your competitors. I will develop a thesis and hypothesis about your area before I invest in it. But if you've been spending a year or two in a space, I expect you to have a really deep subject matter expertise on it, right? And really be able to like answer all the questions that I have, and not get flustered about it, and not be like, I don't know, not lie about it, not get aggressive, right? So, I'm just kind of seeing how you're acting emotionally and intellectually about things, because this hopefully will be a 5+ year relationship as you're building your business, ever greater. There's a saying, right? Lemons ripen early, right? Bad businesses will become bad businesses very quickly and die, versus a good business will hopefully keep getting a higher and higher and higher valuation and attract more and more capital, and will take 5 to 7, 10 years to mature and become that $1+ billion business. And do we want to be hanging out with each other for that long? Like it could be 10 years. And we typically take board observer or board seats, right? So like we're going to be knowing each other for a while. And it's a business, so we're doing this to make money, right? But it's like, oh, this is a difficult person. Like, if this is a bad person, a toxic person, like, is this a good person, or is this person going to be like generating good vibes and being able to like charm people and make business deals? Or is this person going to be generating lawsuits and just having a toxic work culture? And like, is this someone you really want to associate with, or is this going to be a difficult person and and not creating a positive environment, right? So if you have a choice, why would you want to deal with that person? I want to see if this person rude to the waiter. Not definitive, like I'm never going to invest in this person, but it definitely is an influence.
Wow. So like really you're in this space of being paid to learn with resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a great, like, I've always driven my career into where can I love learning. So I think it is awesome that I get paid to learn. So it's highly motivating to me to like, I am super motivated. Like, I don't have to like worry about like, oh, what am I going to do today? Like, hey, besides the pressure of deadlines and reports and getting things done and an analysis and a board presentation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, making decisions. It's just like, I am self-motivated. It's like, I don't understand how, like, I need to understand something. And even if you have like slack in the system, like this afternoon, I've got like an hour and a half free. It's like, I don't understand how X influences Y. And I don't necessarily need to understand it today or tomorrow, but that might influence an investment decision, or it's an area. So I definitely sometimes I literally was figuring out my budget for next year. I'm like, I want to go to this conference. And I literally told my boss, like, that this is just a brain candy conference, right? Like, I'm not going there to do biz dev for a portfolio company. I'm not going there to meet someone at the BU. I'm going there because I'm going to learn about X topics. And I think that'll make me a better investor over the next X years. Because, yeah, I could always read a paper. I could do that at home and it'd be a lot cheaper. But I'll meet people. There's going to be serendipity. And I literally just will learn stuff and make a connection. I had this great conversation when I was at a conference a couple weeks ago about OpenXR. And I just stopped. I talked to a founder at the startup. I was like, yeah, it's not defensible, but I like the founder. And we literally just talked about 40 minutes about OpenXR. It's like, oh, great conversation. Like, if that guy wants to have a talk to me about his other startup, that's great. But I also learned a lot about OpenXR because he was an engineer. He'd been in the space for 10 years. I've been in the space for 6 years. But he had a really in-depth conversation. He's been in the space for longer than I was, had a different perspective, got to go back and forth, pressure test some ideas I've had for a while. I was like, serendipity, like going to a library, right? Like sometimes you want to like poke and say, like, I want that book. Sometimes you just want to browse, and it just like, there's a value in browsing.
Well, there also seems to be a mix here because you're talking to people about, like, it sounds like you're learning a lot about them as people and how they're going to react under pressure with your questions, and also how much they know about the space. But the idea, like, I understand you categorize them maybe as defensible as not, but it looks like you're valuing the people a lot more than the idea.
I think it's a different, it's a combination of factors. And since we work as a team, right, I can rely on other people on my team to help me worry about their technical chops, right? And that, I think, is a huge advantage of HP Tech Ventures and of corporate VCs, is that I can rely on other folks I can do the financial analysis. I can do the team analysis. I can do the business unit economics. I can do the TAM. I can do the competitive analysis, right? I can do a lot of stuff, but I can put a black box around the technical stuff, right? So I can have other folks worry about that stuff. So I just hone in on the 4 or 5 factors that I have to worry about. And then I let other folks worry about the 1 or 2 other things that I need to let them worry about.
That's
If that makes
fantastic.
sense.
And it also really means that you get to connect with those people. I value the same thing you do. Going to the places where the people are is so important.
Yeah.
Right? Getting to feel the culture of those different edges of technology, because they all kind of feel different, you know?
Yep. Yeah. So COVID forced us to kind of do things more remotely than I would have ever thought would have to. But it's just like, well, I still want to do deals, right? So you still got to like move forward. And this is a new constraint that we've got to operate under. So it's like, okay, but
That's fantastic. And when you take a look at the areas that you explore, it would be, am I missing anything when I say artificial intelligence, augmented and
we're,
virtual reality, as well
yeah,
as gaming?
yeah. And now, our year is kind of ending and we kind of do a refresh and we kind of shift, right? We shift at every year and move as our company strategy shifts, right? So we're doing a refresh, and we're probably going to be shifting more into what I would call like, hybrid work for sure, post COVID, right? And you kind of see that with our acquisition. So we're HP Tech Ventures does minority investments, right? But it's a kind of a similar muscle. We're a separate organization, right? But you see that with, M&A is another muscle, right? A distinct but similar muscle. So you see our acquisition of Poly, right? A company down in Santa Cruz. So hybrid work is an important thing for HP going forward. So we're going to be focusing on hybrid work going forward. So we'll probably be doing investments in that space. Another area we'll be looking at is like workforce services and solutions. Basically, digitization. I'm not sure how to say this more eloquently. digitization, right? Basically, digital transformation, making people in their jobs more efficient, and a digital transformation. So that's an area we're getting our arms around and developing hypotheses that we're going to be doing probably between now and the end of the year, is talking to our executives and fine tuning that and understanding that more closely. So hybrid work, digital transformation, workforce services, and then the other areas that you mentioned are the areas going forward that we'll be focused on. So it kind of shifts gradually, right, over the course of, a couple of years. It's kind of a rolling, a moving average, I would say, right? It's not like we okay, stop. Every year we stop and we cut. It's a moving average of things, right? As the company gradually shifts its focus from one area to the other. Gaming, AI, AR, VR, these are still important areas for us, but then it's just like we're kind of looking towards the horizon and move towards other areas as well.
Oh, and what great problems to solve. Because really, when you see how the world shifted during COVID, we saw so many people allow themselves to not call it a real world anymore. They would just say that it's online and offline.
Yeah.
They're starting to explore that. And that is that digital transformation that you're talking about. And once you are able to take the advantage of that digital transformation, you could technically get talent from anywhere, right?
Oh, yeah. Totally fascinating, right? In terms of how the world's gonna, or is, or has collapsed, right? So then it's like, well, how do you unlock value? And that's another thing I like doing, and I hold myself to it intermittently, is trying to read, a book a month or a book every 3 weeks, right? Depending on how good I am or how busy I am with short-term deadlines, is just trying to open up my mind and getting smarter and just, thinking longer term and thinking like, okay, how does this unlock value, or how do I see patterns or see structures, right? I fundamentally try to be, and this aligns with HP, but it's good, which it aligns with my personality, is unlocking value from a technology perspective, right? So just like, how does this, how is this better, faster, cheaper, right? Like it's got to fundamentally do something, one of those three things. Otherwise, like, wait a second, like at the end of the day, after the VCs keep pouring in money, like unless it's making something better, faster, cheaper, like the business unit economics aren't making any sense. So, this is not self-sustaining model, and the startup's not going to be, it's not going to be profitable because it's not any better than the incumbents.
And it's neat to see, like, talking about the utility, it will really separate what companies are going to need to have in the future versus what just companies want to have.
Yeah. So, but there's some technologies I've been looking for years, right? And I'm just like, keep looking and looking for them because I'm like, oh, this is going to really unlock value, right? And then there's some things you just kind of stumble across because like, like that's cool. Like that's going to make a PC better or more secure, right? Or lighter or faster, right? So
you have like a VC quest log? Like you have things that you've been looking for years?
There's some things that I think of just in my mind that I'm just like, oh, wouldn't that be cool, right? Like, in advanced manufacturing is an area, right? Like there are some things, and this is actually more for one of my partners who covers the space, so I'm not as familiar with it, right? But there are some things in advanced manufacturing, right? That it's just like, wouldn't it be cool if you can make a piece that instead of it being like one molded piece or one solid piece, and I can't do this justice, right? Like you can make it like a fraction of the weight, right? Because it's hollow, right? Or you can invert it and you're not wasting all this material because you could actually 3D print it. You could actually 3D print a part. It's just so much lighter, and it literally weighs a third of what it should weigh, and you're actually not wasting all this extremely expensive stainless steel, right? And you could reuse it, but then it's just like, it's just so much more efficient.
So that's an element of like streaming what we have as ideas into the reality, and that's going to continue kind of stepping forward. I like where you're
go back to science fiction, right? Like, oh, like wireless charging, right? Like, wouldn't it be wonderful? Like, oh, like we've got the input, but we can't get the output right? Like there are all these things, and some of it literally just comes from science fiction, right? So
it's interesting to see how art is leads the way. Like
Yeah.
a few years ago, we saw that book come out from Ernest Cline, Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Right. And like at the time, a lot of it was like, okay, I can see some evidence of this existing in the world. But after COVID, we'd be like, oh, wow, there are world events that can massively accelerate our step towards a virtual experience.
Yeah, we've got a ways to go. Right, just in terms of the compute requirements and the hardware requirements. Like there's just like a lot of hard physics standing in the way for anything like a real metaverse.
Yeah. And that it's interesting to see how the different companies are kind of like approaching the edge of it now.
Yeah. I keep
The
hoping.
announcements make it look like it's like a car model that's going to be released next year.
I love the AR VR space. So I've been working in business for a couple of decades now, and the AR VR space is by far the space that has the people who just like love the industry much more so than say endpoint security or CRM, right? People in the AR VR space, and I love them. I'm in the industry, love the space. We all want it to happen now. And it's just like, the physics are so hard. Like, I don't know how many pairs of AR, VR headsets I have, more than they want to admit to. But it's just like, come on. But it's just going to take longer than we all want it to take, I think, for massive adoption to happen. So I'm happy companies are spending the money, and they want it to happen sooner rather than later. But it's just, it's just a lot of hard physics that have to get solved and a lot of hard engineering that has to get solved. But I'm still an advocate and an optimist in the space.
That's fantastic. And I like how you summarize the AR VR people as being a passionate bunch, because there's no doubt about it.
I go to a conference or two every year, and I love it. It's some of my favorite people and some of my favorite conferences. It's great to go.
So you actually spend a lot of time in amazing, prestigious post-secondary environments. You were teaching at Haas just the other evening, you mentioned, which is at Berkeley. You've also taught at the Wharton School of Business. And when you take a look at those experiences, what do you see coming forward from tomorrow? So when you're talking to those young, bright people, where do you think that their focus or where their passion is going to lead them in making changes?
It's been a while since I taught at Wharton, because what was happening was that I was having immovable objects happen at Wharton and at HP. So I was like, So I was like, this is a bad idea. And I'm only, and the same thing at Haas. Now I just I'm on a panel there occasionally. So I see it more from the startup world than I do there. And what I do at Haas now is I'm a panelist on there basically for people who want to either get into startups or VCs. So it's very much the same world. It's like people who are heading towards being a startups. It's just the old saw at this point, right? Like technology is everywhere, right? I think people have realized that in the last 5 or even 10 years. And it's not just the Bay Area, right? Like we're still in the Bay Area, the primary market, but we're no longer 70% of VC funding. We're 50% of VC funding, right? And no one in the East, not no one, in the East Coast schools, maybe people didn't want to be VCs 15 years. I was on the panel. There was this woman who went to Columbia Business School 10 years ago. And she said, yeah, when I was at Columbia 10 years ago, no one wanted to become a VC. Now I go back there, everyone's like, how did you get into VC? Right? So it just kind of radically changed.
Totally. Like when somebody used to say that they were an entrepreneur, it used to mean that they couldn't be employed.
When I was an independent consultant for 10 years, my parents were like, you need money? I'm like, no, I'm good. They didn't quite believe me. I'm like, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've consulted to like Apple, Microsoft, Cisco. Like I have a house, I have a car. It's okay. But thank you. I appreciate your support. If not your trust in me, faith in my work.
That's
I think it's changed. Yeah, no, I think it's changed. Yeah.
And if you were giving advice to yourself, maybe as you were entering in, is there anything that you look back and you're like, you know what, I would have approached this differently?
I think I fell into it by luck, and I've enjoyed the journey, and it worked out. I appreciate the luck I've had, and I've always, just like I said, I've kind of led with learn, and what's this? There's a saying I used to know. Focus on. It's like gold will, like, like, I don't remember it, but it's like focus on X and then the gold will follow. Like, like don't worry about the money. Like, just focus on like learning, and then like money will follow. Right. So I kind of took that to heart. Right. It's just, so yeah. No.
So you've been looking at this as a craft to develop yourself in. And
it's just like, like don't worry about it. Just do well, do well. And then the money will take care of itself. Like if you're doing a good job, if you're learning stuff, don't worry about that other stuff. It'll happen if you're doing a good job, right? Like you don't worry about the nitty gritty stuff. It'll kind of take care of it. If you're doing a good job, it'll take care of itself, right?
Yeah, and that's something that really it leaves people kind of wondering, like, where do you measure? At the end of each day, do you say this was a good day because? At the end of the quarter, do you say this is a good quarter because? Are you very granular with that, or do you go with the flow?
I go with the flow, but I also appreciate the luxury of what I've had, right? Like, because it's like where we were born, etc. Right? And when I was born, my parents went to 3rd grade and 7th grade. Right? So they didn't have the luxury, but I was born in America, so I had the luxury, right? And I got into a good school, and that afforded me lots of other opportunities after I got into that school. So yeah, I drove my wife crazy sometimes when I had my own independent company. Like I had a couple, sometimes I'd have a lean quarter, and it's like, I made jack this quarter. But it's always worked out. And she'd be like, it's like, I literally sometimes would make almost nothing an entire quarter. But, it always kind of worked out, right? So I wouldn't spaz out if I had a really lean quarter, because over the course of the year, it always kind of worked itself out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that short-term mindset is something that I think is one of the biggest challenges of people that are in leadership or running their own business in any capacity, is how do you not freak out and lose your ability to produce? Because that's often what it does, is it results in hesitation.
But then sometimes if you're running a public company and you like have a horrendous quarter, like that's like you get like 1,000 people yelling at you, like I would freak out, right? I had my wife like extremely worried. Well, that was one person, and when she had faith in me. Like if I have 1,000 shareholders, like I'd be freaking out, right? Or if I had a limited liability company, had 5 partners, that would probably be freaking out. I had one person, right? My children didn't understand yet, right? But so it depends on the situation you're in, right? And we had a low nut. We had a small house with a low mortgage, right? My wife's salary could kind of cover it back then. So it worked out okay. So it's just the situation we're in, right? So I think it just depends on where you're at in life.
I'm so glad that you talked about that. Is that like you were in this position where you could really develop as an entrepreneur because you had such control or discipline in your personal life?
But it was just by circumstances, because this company, we'd moved out here for her job. The company I was with, this was 2001, the .com company I was with, we had a baby. 2 weeks later, we had our all hands at 8 a.m. Like, well, that's a bad sign. The company I was with went bankrupt. We all went out there at 8 a.m. They're like, hey, everyone, we're bankrupt. Here's your check. Cash it. Because the creditors are going to come. So everyone go to the bank right now and cash your check. And thus I started off my own independent business after that, with some of the folks who were at that company. And I did that for like the next 10 years as an independent consultant, doing biz dev and strategy for, Apple, Adobe, Cisco, Intel, etc. With some of those folks. But and I was basically like forced to. It wasn't part of the plan. It just happened by circumstances.
That must be an invaluable asset now, is you were consulting these successful startups in strategy development. So now when you take a look at the companies that are looking for you to invest, you're looking at them through the same eyes. Like, do they,
Great.
Yeah.
It was super. I don't think I would have had the gumption to go out on my own, much less do it for 10 years. To hang up my own shingle and, knock on wood, it worked out, consult a long litany of Fortune 500 and a bunch of startup companies doing exactly what I love doing, which was, strategy and biz dev for all these technology companies. It was awesome. I absolutely loved it. And then I got bored of it, basically. I remembered I'd hired a mentor, who I consider my mentor, to do a project with me. And, we were doing a project and I was like, he's not 4 times smarter than me anymore. I think I've kind of flattened out my learning curve. So then I basically joined a friend's startup and we raised $23 million from Benchmark and a few other folks. And I was the head of BD. Sadly, we lost to Airbnb.
Really?
So, yeah. I think it must have been the market size was too small. I think that's what it was.
So,
no.
All right. So is this a moment where you so it looks like you experienced something that was like a startup failure, right?
Would you call it? It was a great experience. It was called couch surfing. So it was started by 4 folks, one of them who was my friend.
And they had a dog?
I don't think
you were saying the perfect garage team is 4 people and a dog.
They already had a few other folks but I was their first kind of like mission driven person. I love the idea. It had started off as a nonprofit, and basically it was Airbnb before Airbnb. It predated Airbnb by quite a bit of time, but it was like stay at someone's place, but they had promised they were never going to do advertising and they were never going to charge anybody to stay at someone's house. And I was hired to lead their biz dev and strategy. But it was a little bit hard to make money given that one of the founders had promised we were never going to charge anybody to stay in someone's house. And actually, Casey is an amazingly charismatic person. So I actually had to ask him, like, Casey, you've got to stop, like, I've got to have like these meetings with you where I've got to think about things and then I'm going to like respond to you after the meetings with whether or not I agree with you. Because otherwise I'm just going to agree with you because you're so charismatic. Otherwise I'm just going to agree with you because it's just like a Steve Jobs effect. Because he's still that way.
Wow. That's kind of
it was a great experience. Even if we lost to Airbnb, it was an awesome experience. Everyone was I was like, God, people believe it was a great company.
And does it look like from the outside, it looks like people run out of burn rate and that's the end of it, right? Like they run out of runway.
That's what happens 9.5 out of 10 times, right? You're not getting product market fit, right?
So when now as someone who is coaching and helping people that are running through that same gauntlet, right? And also as somebody who is talking to some of these companies where they have that charismatic leader, how are you able to sort out what you're being sold and what you believe will actually take place? Like, it seems that you have to look at this through many lenses.
Yeah. So Casey is extremely charismatic. He is like a top 10, he's like a top 10%. So few people are as charismatic as Casey. So it's easier to kind of, call bullshit on most leaders versus him. So he was super charismatic. So you just kind of like look at the numbers on a lot of people, right? And you can kind of like sift through, and I'm pretty financially, I like going through numbers, right? And kind of like that's the first thing. If I have that second or third meeting with someone and I'm seriously considering them, that's what I do. Is like I go through that spreadsheet with the CFO, and spend an hour and a half going through it. That's what I'm doing next week with some CFO that I'm actually like, getting serious with. Like before I go through their data room, it's like, oh, I like them. Have a second meeting. Okay, don't give me your data room because I don't want to, get all this private information and feel like I'm getting super serious. I'm like, okay, send me your forecast. Let me go through let me go through your financial model with you and walk through it with you, and see if the business unit economics make any sense, right? So that's how I kind of like kick the tires. Most people are not that, like, there are only some people who are that charismatic, right? That could be like, wow, like, you're walking on water. I'll believe anything you say. A lot of CEOs have to be that charismatic, right? And actually, I'll tell this to some people, and particularly people or groups that I'll talk to, that I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because what you're doing as a startup as an individual, is financially irrational, right? Like you should go work for a Fortune 500 company, go make whatever you're going to go make, $250,000, because that is financially a better decision, right? If you look at the distribution, because if you're just starting, you haven't raised any money, you're going to go make zero, and you're going to go work on this and make zero money for a year. Then you're going to go try to raise $300,000 from friends and family and pay yourself, again, zero, while you're working on this for another year. Then you're going to go work an accelerator. Then you're going to try to raise $1 million and pay yourself $100,000. Like, do you see where this is going? You're paying yourself like $100,000, let's say, over the next 2 years until you raise $3 million. The probability of success is so small. It's a wonderful experience. Totally glad I worked at the startup. You can make intergenerational wealth. You can have a huge impact. It's totally fun. I recommend it. I hope my kids go work at startups. It's like amazing experience. Just understand that what the risk reward ratio is, and it's just not for everybody. That's all I'm trying to tell people. Don't assume it's like, I'm going to make $100 million.
So let's say that somebody has a really strong why, a passion that's tied inside that they just need to see something exist, right? Where do they screw it up? Where do these startup teams just is there a few initial bad decisions that can really like limit your options?
Not listening to anybody else's feedback. Just listen to the market, listen to your customers. And it's just like, by the way, I give the same talk to people who listen, who want to get PhDs. Like, hey, get a PhD if you want to get a PhD, but I might kind of like pressure test it and say, okay, if you get this PhD in English literature, this is what's going to happen to you, right? You're going to get a job in North Dakota, right? Making $35,000 a year, right? Which, if you're happy with that, that's great. Just understand like that. Just understand what your probable road is going to be like for you in 5 or 7 years. Not just understand what it's going to be like before you make the investment of time and money. Just have a realistic sense. Write it down, right? And understand, and don't just wish it away or not kind of think out what it's going to. Just write down, what do you think is going to happen? Begin with it, like, don't think, oh, and I'm going to become a full professor at Stanford. And like, really? Well, what are the odds? Let's just like think about it. And what does that professor get paid? Because I've actually looked at the educational market for, I think it was Microsoft, right? Like, so few professors get tenure now. It really is like the market has really shifted, right? So it's a lot of adjunct professors who get paid $5,000 per class. So it's a really harsh market. So many things have to go right? So if one thing goes wrong, it all can kind of get blown up, right? So
how many startups look at it that way, where they're only accounting for the things that can go well and not all the ways they can experience failure?
I think almost all of them only look at it the way it can go right. Otherwise, the other ones just like put their pencils down and say like, I'm just going to stay at my job at Cisco or Meta or HP or wherever. And it was like, and I don't want to be
It's like the
discouraging.
whole mentality, like don't look down.
I want people to be happy. So I want to encourage people to do startups, and I want to like coach them if they want to do it. But I just want people to kind of go into it and be realistic. Just like, that's all I'm trying to actually, and I mentor at Berkeley all the time, and I give free advice to folks. And it's just like, I actually actively encourage people to do startup. Like, these are people like, I want to do a startup. Like, God bless you, go, go, go. And I just try to like give them advice so that they're not disappointed. And those people tend to be like the right profile for risk reward, right? They're like, it's like, go, 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 right? Run, run, run. Like, they know what they're getting
I love
into,
it, though.
right? Like, they don't
Yeah.
have 3 kids. They don't have a mortgage payment. Like, they're not going to face financial calamity, right? If they don't, have a $200,000 or $100,000 of income. But there are a couple of cases where I know people who are founders, and it's just like, oh, it didn't work out. And it's just like, oh, like, why did you do this to yourself? Like, oh, like, I feel so bad for them, right? And it's just like, oh, like, they took out credit card debt, right? It's like, what did you do? Why did you do that? Like, oh, you just feel horrible for them.
Oh man, like the discomfort is extreme.
Yeah, you just feel horrible for these people.
Oh, I'm having some sound challenges here.
Yeah.
Maybe try to turn up my volume a little bit because I think I have some. I'm not sure if my line went blank here.
You sound clear to me.
I think my audio is coming through clear, but not coming through to me as well.
Okay.
Oh, I think I've got you back now.
Good.
Yeah, it's like when you see somebody going into what you call financial calamity, like where they just end up taking what I call a face smash, right? I'm wondering also, like, do you see people that do this repeatedly? Because I have to think that discomfort would mean this is a one-time shot.
I haven't seen people fail miserably multiple times yet at the same thing. But maybe it's because I've only been doing this for 7+ years. So maybe, come back in another 10 years. I think, I have seen people try at the same startup for 7 years, right? Like, I have seen people like still pounding away at the same idea. So, just like, wow, I was actually just talking to someone. Oh, and blah, blah, blah just called me, and they're still like hammering away. And I'm like, whoa, they're still trying to do blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, wow. And I don't know, maybe the person's wealthy. Maybe it's just a side hustle for them. Like, I'm not going to worry about it, right? Because it's just like, but I'm like, woof, like, that person's still, they believe, they have to believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, why are they still driven at this? Is this like a personal thing? Is it like are they making progress but it's slow?
I don't know. But then, then you have the person who knocks on the door of the 57th VC, and they finally get that check, and then boom, and it blows up, just like, J.K. Rowling's, right? And the book publisher, and it's just like boom, and it blows up. So
That's really interesting. I wonder how do you strike balance here? So meaning that, like, you're in this what can be a very fast-paced environment with some very big things happening. Like, startups can be massive. They can be almost all consuming. A lot of the people that you meet are super passionate and really need what they're working on to happen, right?
yeah.
Do you find that ever weighs on you? Is that hard mileage emotionally?
Yes, for sure. Particularly now, right? First downturn in a long time. The last few weeks, I've had some very emotional conversations with folks. So it's, I mean, I just had some emotional conversations, right? That have gone like an hour and a half with some founders. Part of the job. And it's just like personal relationships with people that I've known now for half a dozen years, and it's like this is just part of the job description. And we're not talking about business unit economics. We're just talking about life. Like literally, I asked one of my founders, "What will make you happy?" And then before I knew it, an hour had passed. Right? And I literally just wanted to know, what will make you happy? It's the question we kind of started off this with, right? But I've known this guy now for a while. I literally like him. I care for him. I don't talk to him every day or every week or every month. We live in separate cities, right? Because of COVID, I haven't seen him in probably 2 years, 3 years. But I really like him and I care for him. And I'm like, are you happy? You don't seem happy. Like the company hasn't done as well as we would have hoped. Like, what do you want to do, right, with your company, right? I can't, it's like just what do you want? Do you want to be CEO still? Like, and it's just a personal question. It's his choice. I can't. I mean, I can't. I'm making up a number. HP owns 2% of this company. It's not my call. What do you want out of life? You're 30 years old, whatever he is. So it's just like, right? Just trying to help someone. How do you not want to help someone? Right? It's just, it's just kind of a grind because he's put in, he's probably worked 70 hours a week, if I had to guess, on this company. And it's just like, it's just like, and what have I done? 2% of that on his company, right? It's like, come on. Like, I can't talk to him for an hour when he wants to talk for an hour. Please.
Well, I have to say that is amazing perspective. I always think that companies don't make relationships, people make relationships. And really, like, I second the motion. If Andrew is watching.
He might be.
Overworked.
He's such a good guy. We'll have to edit this part out, by the way.
And like to hear where you're coming from and know what drives people caring about their outcome can totally be a game changer, right? Like to get that perspective, do I want to be CEO? And then the answer from inside them is yes. Those next moves are going to be dynamic. As soon as they admit that to themselves, as soon as they reconnect with what drove them there originally. And if they can't reconnect with that, then every day past this is just another day into the dark.
We'll see. I'm not sure what his answer is going to be.
But what a great question. What makes you happy? And I think that's a great note to end on, as I do want to respect your time because I really appreciate you coming and sharing your perspective.
This was fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you for asking me on.
Well, please, we will definitely invite you back. I would love to hear how things are progressing as you shift priorities and all the amazing things that you get to learn.
Yeah, it's like this job is great for anybody who wants to learn. I highly recommend it. And it really was a treat talking with you today.
Oh, my pleasure. This has been Leadership Line of Sight with Angelo Del Priore. He is a partner at HP Tech Ventures and an incredible connection. Obviously, someone who cares deeply about the people around him and how he can contribute to their community. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Taylor. I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I really appreciate getting to share Angelo's perspective today on Leadership Line of Sight.